What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Ham Radio Crash Course. Welcome to Saturday. Thanks for tuning in. We had a live stream from Callum a little bit earlier, so I hope you checked that out. It was pretty cool. Getting to talk to him on the chat. Always like doing that. Glad you could make it out here. We're going to get a quick little introduction going because I don't have a lot of news to talk about. And we want to get kind of right into talking to our guest, who is Jeri Ellsworth. I posted the link in the description to her Twitter page. So if you have questions, what we're going to do later, we're going to take questions. I'm watching the chat. We've got the admins in the chat as well. So we'll be capturing those to ask Jeri as things come up. Feel free to post those. And then we'll have a call in later. So if you have a great question or something you'd like to ask, we'll open that up towards the end. Also, again, reminding everybody, we have links in the description to our Facebook and our Discord. The Discord is where we do the live after show. So after the live stream here, we all go over to Discord. It's a great big party line voice chat, so where we can talk about amateur radio and other fun things like that. But without further ado, let's flip things over and say hi to Jeri.
Well,
And
hello.
Let me unmute you. Oh, wait, I clicked it too many times. Okay, there we go.
Hello. Hi.
So
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we got Jeri Ellsworth here. So, for those that may be new to Jeri Ellsworth, why don't you give us a little? What's your background? I know you've been on the internet for a while having fun, but you've done so many cool, interesting things. You're an amateur radio operator. You're into electronics. Go for it.
I'm an odd duck, a very odd duck. I was a strange kid. I was really into electronics and science as a kid, early home computers. That was my first exposure also to radio and ham radio. Some of my earliest mentors were ham radio operators. I lived in this really tiny town, so finding out about electronics or computers, like you had to go to the library and the ham radio guys would go hang out there. Mm-hmm. They always tried to get me into doing ham radio, but I was more into pirate radio back then and running way too much power.
I've been following you for a while on Twitter, and I've been subscribed to you for a long time on YouTube. And I didn't know about the pirate thing until I saw Bob's video and you were talking about it. So break that down a little bit. How did that work out? Because it was like an arms race from what it sounded like, right? It was like a local pirate arms race of radio.
It was. So I lived on this like long gravel road out in the middle of nowhere. And probably when I was about 10 or 12 years old, somewhere in there, I ran into my neighbor up the road who was a guy that was just a little bit older than me. He was also into electronics. And he's like, hey, I built this transmitter. And he showed it to me and I thought it was really cool. So I figured out how to build a transmitter. And we started measuring the distances we could transmit on the AM broadcast band. Mm-hmm. We'd ride our bicycles with our little transistorized radios, and we'd measure the number of phone poles from our homes to see how far we were transmitting. And so it was this arms race. Like he'd make a transmitter a little bit bigger, and then I would make one a little bit bigger, and then I would do something with a tube. And then he would do something with a push-pull with two tubes.
Yeah, yeah. Do something with a tube. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. And it was, fond memories of Saturdays and Sundays just riding our bikes and listening to our stations. And we made transmitters so powerful that we would ride all afternoon. We couldn't reach the end of it. So then we switched to the FM broadcast band, which was a little bit harder to get propagation and harder to make transmitters. And we just continued. I'm surprised, back then the FCC actually cared. I'm surprised we didn't get
a knock on the door.
I had a trick, though. Before I would run the wire out to my antenna, I'd do about 20 turns around the phone line. So that's how I got a little boost out of my transmitter. He could never figure out why, like, we would be going past the phone poles. It would just get louder each time you'd go by a phone drop.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Get a little boost. Right on. Very good.
So but I was also big into computers as well, and phone freaking. So I used my computer to war dial our entire area code, just doing a bunch of stuff on phones. Had a lot of fun doing phone projects. I made a little triac circuit that could pick the phone up almost instantly and then turn a little LED on so I could tell when someone called. And then I could turn on tape recorders and play things back automatically. So I'd call my friends and I'd prank call them. And then they would call me back and I'd have like, this phone line's been disconnected, doo-doo-doot. And I would just immediately play it back to them. And I had my friends convinced that I had complete control over the phones, even though it was just a dirty little hack.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, are there still dialable numbers out there that people could technically war dial into, or is that pretty much a thing of the past now? I haven't even
Gosh, I
thought
don't
about that.
know. Yeah, I should just war dial all of Silicon Valley and see what's out there.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
would be curious what would come up. There has to be something, right? Something like super legacy, like a water distribution plant or something like that.
I recall back in the day when I was just dialing just random numbers, I found local gas stations had these monitoring systems for the tanks, and they were
Yeah.
completely exposed. Like back then, everyone was so naive. Like I could have gone in there and like reset their daily, tallies
Right.
because they didn't password protect any of that stuff.
Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that. But yeah, that seems important because they use that to determine when they need to re-up more gas. So I know
Yeah,
somebody with a gas station. I should actually check and see how they're doing it nowadays. Tell them,
put
hey,
a
you might
pass.
want to password protect your your endpoint.
Oh my God, you could probably cause a lot of chaos. Just say that it's, empty, but it's actually full, and then they come try to top it off and overflow. My dad
Right.
owned a gas station, so he didn't have a fancy one like that. It had auto monitoring, but yeah, it could be really bad because that fuel coming out of the tankers is coming out fast.
Yeah. That's crazy. Real quick, Charles Michael, thank you so much for the support there. And it looks like you're taking your tech exam this Wednesday. So good luck on that, and I hope that goes well. So you are also a race car driver. Um,
Yeah,
how did that
yeah.
how did that work out?
So when I was in high school, junior high, everything was kind of cool. High school came along, kids figured out I was weird. They started picking on me, and I kind of went through this really rough phase.
Yeah.
And one day I just like snapped, clobbered this kid with a book, got kicked out of school because they had the zero tolerance thing, which
Yeah.
ironically they could be mean as they wanted to me, and there was
Right.
no zero tolerance on that. But kicked out of school. But when I came back, the bad kids are like, hey, you're all right. And so I kind of fell in with all the bad kids, the goth kids. We did that. And so I learned the more like extreme my persona, the more kind of dangerous, the
Mm-hmm.
more people left me alone. So I just started amplifying that and
Turn
just,
into that. Yeah. Turn into that turn. Right.
yeah, exactly. And so my father had done some amateur racing when I was a kid, just really kind of, state fairground kind of smash car up type things. And I thought it was kind of cool. And so once I got my driver's license, I went to a local racetrack and I started just watching it with friends. And I'm like, this is like the most badass thing that I could ever do. And I got super interested in it. And so I went to my father. I'm like, and I was working at his gas station at the time. I'm like, Dad, build me a race car. He's like, absolutely not, no way. And I was begging him, and he said, eventually I broke him down. He said, like, if you can either figure out a way to buy one or build one, you can do it. Otherwise, quit bugging me about it. I'm like, okay, I know how to build things. So I went around town, started talking to all the local machinists in town because I knew I had to learn how to weld and fabricate things. And so on the weekends, I got a part-time job. Well, not really. I wasn't getting paid. It was just mentoring from a local machinist. So he'd have me come in on Saturday and he would just have me crawling around in the bed of the lathe, like, greasing the gibs and cleaning the bed of the lathe. And in exchange, he's like, okay, today I'll show you how to do some weldments and pipe fitting or turn metal, tap metal. And that was like great. And so I started building the race car. And the whole
Literally
time,
building the cage. You're talking about you're
yeah,
building out
so
the cage for it.
these are big V8 powered
Yeah.
race cars, tube chassis.
Mm-hmm.
I built my first car. I went out, I raced. I did a terrible job because in my mind, when I went to the racetrack, I'm going to be like, I'm going to set the fast time of the night. And
Right.
out there, and I was like 2 seconds slower than everyone, which is really slow compared to everyone. Got into my first crash that first night. It's like spun out, and a car came up and hit me head on, and it's like, dunk, like, hey, that's not too bad. That was my first like impression of it. But then I had gotten this book on building race car chassis, and in the back of the book was a phone number. And so I just kept calling this dude that wrote this book, like, "Hey, Duke, I got this problem. Tell me how to do this, do that. And the second year of racing, just before the race season started, he's like, if you can get to Florida, my wife and I will put you up and I'll teach you everything you need to know about racing. And
Whoa.
so I took a Greyhound bus from Oregon all the way to Florida, middle of nowhere, Florida, which was brutal for like a 17, 18-year-old.
I was gonna say, how old were you when you did this? Wow. Okay. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I
wild.
was still in high school at the time. So I go out there and I spend a week with him. It was kind of cool. Like the first 4 or 5 days, he teaches me about, the dynamics of race cars and roll center and Ackerman steering and all that stuff. And like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, but he's like, if you want to be fast, it's all about psychology. It has nothing about to do with your car. Like you can have a really crappy setup car,
Right.
but if you like own all the other drivers as far as their impression of you, you own the fans in the grandstands, you like overall you're going to do much better. So he taught me all the psychology of like to psych out the other drivers, how
That's
to
awesome.
get the fans on my side because he told me about the racing business. Like if you're a track owner, you want to get a bunch of people in the stands, you want them drinking lots of beer, and you want them buying nachos.
Right.
That's where the money comes from, and they come for favorites. And
Right.
so if you be their favorite and have a personality, people will show up there. So the track promoter will like you more, you'll get more favorable flagging, you'll get, you know, they'll help you out a bunch more. So my second year, I did a lot better. I started winning a lot. I started getting a bunch of trophies. And my trick was I'd just go into the audience and I'd find the first kid and like, here, have this trophy. And I became immediately like the track favorite.
Oh
And
wow.
it's sure enough, you'd get a little bit more favorable flagging. And also, I started to figure out how to get in the heads of the other drivers. So I started doing things like putting brake lights on my race car that randomly turned on,
Oh.
which worked out really well.
Oh, that's messed up, man. That's
So
really messed up.
like you see brake lights, you never see them on the racetrack, but if you see them, you just automatically slow down. And it
Right.
pissed them off so much.
Oh my gosh.
And then I got
Yeah.
better at building cars, and I got a reputation of building really great race cars, and I started selling them. But then I would put fake stuff on my race car to make it look like I was doing really insane things, and people would start copying it. So this was oval dirt track.
Mhm.
So 20, 30 cars racing around simultaneously
Is that
on
the
the
ones
track.
with the airfoil on the top?
Yeah, I did some sprints. I
Yeah.
did some models that look like big wedges of cheese,
Yep.
800 horsepower
Yep.
V8 engines, big, call them humper tires on
Yep.
them.
Yep. And one's wider on one side than the other for offset, right? For the whatever the
Yep,
bank is.
you put all this cross weight to counter that out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my heart is just pumping thinking about the race cars now.
And how
But
long did you do that for?
about 5 years. But
Wow.
some of the things that I did was insane. Like I made a lot of people would ballast their car with lead to kind of get the weight and balance right. And
Sure.
a mentor told me like just build your car on the scales as you build it and make the weight and balance perfect so you don't have to ballast it and you don't have to carry it around.
That
But I
way you're
would
not carrying that weight. You still keep it light.
yeah. So I would make fake weight and lead bars and put them on my car. So they were really thin steel tubes that were welded on the end. And I just pour a little tiny bit of lead so it looked like it was filled with lead. And I'd put it up on the right front, which is an insane place to put it. And then you'd see people copying that. So they were slowing themselves down trying to copy me.
Man, you really were at everybody's head. So you've got a bit of a games theory background, I assume. Whether you naturally fell into it or not, it sounds like you're playing the game.
Yeah, it's super fun. I can go on and on about racing,
Oh,
but I think my best story, just to wrap
sure,
it all up,
yeah.
is so I was definitely into computers and electronics. So I built a little 6502 processor-based single board computer to do traction control on my race car. So I would measure the RPM of the engine from the tach, and then I would, on the left front, I had a Hall effect sensor. I'd measure the front wheel, and then I would measure front tire spin versus rear tire, or rear tire spin versus front. And then the 6502 is doing a little bit of calculation of percentage. And then if I exceeded rear tire spin by a certain percentage, it would trick my rev limiter on the car to start to rev limit the engine.
Okay.
So my car insanely fast. I could just pretty much put
you could spin the tires wherever you wanted, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, I would set it to like 10 or 15% rear tire spin, and I would just drift all the way around the track. It had this really cool side effect where when the rev limiter hit, it would start to cancel the spark for some of the
Oh, so
cylinder
you're shooting flames.
flames. Yeah, it was awesome. And that just like I was the only car out there shooting like huge flames out the side, and so the audience is like, "Oh, love
Oh
it,"
man, that's
because
cool.
yeah.
I love
Um,
that. I love that story. So
Back on
man,
to tell you more racing stories. They go and on and on.
I bet. I bet.
But
So
I mean, on a serious note, this time in my life, though, I was like really unhappy
right.
because I was kind of like I was doing all these kind of badass things, but internally, I was still kind of like tore up from being like the picked on kid. Um, but I started to quickly learn after racing. So I quit racing one day, and a friend of mine had built a 486 computer in his garage, and he had convinced a wholesaler to sell him parts wholesale. And this is 1995, and
Ah,
it was a fantastic time to be building computers. And he showed me this computer, and he's like, I paid $600 for all these parts, but it's like a $1,400 or $1,500 computer. And my entrepreneurial side, I'm like, holy cow, that is like amazing. Lots of profit, way better than building race cars
yep.
because you couldn't make much money off of those. And so I sold all my racing gear and we opened a computer store together. And of course, I'm still kind of like this punk kid, really rough on the edges, swearing like a sailor. Immediately, me and my business partner start like we're at each other's throat all the time. And he ends up booting me out of the business, and I lost everything in this. Um, so I also dropped out of high school at this point as well.
Sure, because as one does, right? Yeah.
So I was making so much money at race cars, like why
Right.
would I
Right.
stick around? And so I went to my father, hey, what should I do? Like just got kicked out, and he got this lawyer and booted me out, and he's like, you should go back to school and then go off to college. And I'm tore up, and I'm in my apartment, and I'm kind of crying, and like, he can't do that. I'm going to destroy him.
Good.
So I just went down the street. I scraped as much money together as I could. I moved out of my apartment. I rented this old barber shop that had a one chair barber shop, and I threw the barber chair behind the back of the store. And then I just scraped up enough money to get some store fixtures and moved into the back of the store, started living in the back of the store, had no money for product at the time.
Wow. Okay.
So I had almost no inventory. So I'd go to his dumpster and I'd take all the colorful boxes, like, ooh, a Voodoo video card box. This will look nice on the store shelf. So my whole store was full of empty boxes, and people would come in, and I was just like out for revenge. I'm like, I'm going to destroy this guy.
Right.
And so people would come in like, ooh, I want that Voodoo video card. I'm like, well, I don't. That one's committed. If you give
Right.
me some money,
Reserved. Yeah. Give me his down payment. I'll get another one for you ASAP. What do you want me to put it in? Build him up a computer, right?
and I started to learn a lot at that point, and that was kind of a turning point too, like mentally for me, getting my kind of like self-confidence back, because through my whole life there's been mentors that have helped me: the ham radio guys, the race car guy, the machinist. And luckily for me, I opened the store across the street from this insurance salesman who kind of took pity on me. He knew that I was just scraping by, and he'd bring me food every lunch, and he just kind of
Whoa.
with me. And so he was teaching me these valuable lessons, which I didn't want to hear, but he'd come in and be like, darkening your eyes out with eyeliner is probably not a very relatable thing, and wearing like goth clothes with chains hanging off of it. Like there's this thing,
Right.
customers need to trust you. And slowly I started to make these changes and started dressing more professional. And hey, sales started taking off, and
Ah.
my burn in my belly to destroy my business partner and to never be undersold. And so my store just took off, and it was just so hot around 95, 96 that I was getting pallets of gear coming in, and there was no space to put it inside. So they would just drop it on the sidewalk, forklift it on the sidewalk, and then people would be lined up. And this is the point where I got to start to hire people, and breaking down the pallets, like handing out video cards and sound cards, and like making sure people weren't stealing stuff off the pallet. It was so exciting.
That's nuts. That's
Yeah,
crazy
yeah,
to think that you drop a pallet of computer equipment, particularly at that time, with
yeah.
how expensive things were, and just have to like handing stuff out,
It
probably
was
just
crazy.
grabbing wads of cash. Just here you go, take it.
Yeah, on my dot matrix printer, we'd print out like all the orders.
Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Well,
yeah.
so you've come a long way, right? You've come a long way. You're now the CEO, or I believe you're CEO or partner, right? For Tilt Five, is that kind of where you're?
Yeah,
And
a startup now.
yeah, so you have a startup doing some very cool augmented reality things. And I thought we'd have you on to describe what it does. And then maybe if you thought about it, which I'm sure you have, what could we do with it with amateur radio?
Oh, there's tons you can do.
Yeah.
Well, let me finish up my story
Oh
really
yeah,
quick.
sorry. I wasn't trying to I know it just I know you got a limited time and I didn't want to lose it. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
4 minutes. 4 minutes. I'll
I'm
get us
sorry. Go ahead.
to the new startup because it's all kind of relevant.
Hmm.
Uh, computer stores, great. Had 5 stores. They went bankrupt. 2000 dot bomb. Everything changed.
Yep.
Uh, went back to my father. What should I do? He's like, you should go to school. You should get a degree. The computer store thing was a good run. And I'm like, no, I've been doing electronics this whole time in the back of my computer store for fun. I'm just going to go to Silicon Valley and just brute force my way into the electronics industry, which was, I don't know what I was thinking. But I went to Silicon Valley. I just started going to events. I didn't have any money to pay to go into these different events. So I'd sneak in and then I would just shake everybody's hands and just like talk to every person I could and try to figure out if anyone had any need for engineering work. And so eventually I'd start getting interviews, and I'm still living in Portland, and I would come down to Silicon Valley back and forth to do these interviews and just getting rejected over and over again. And eventually one founder took a pity on me, and he's like, well, I'll give you a chance, basically.
Hmm.
It was kind of a funny situation. Like I went in for the interview, made it in like 1 or 2 interviews, and they just walked me out the door. And I'm like leaving the building, and I run into the founder of the company. He's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "They just booted me." They're like, "Nah, come with me." And then he just like
Wow.
pulled everyone into a conference room and just hosted the interview. And he's like, "We're taking a chance on her." And so I took that very serious, and I did a knock up job on it. I did really good, worked like overtime, got the project done. They were very happy, and that springboarded my career. And I started doing a ton of contract work out of Silicon Valley. And I got this reputation of the person you call if you need something done quickly. Um, and I had this kind of crew of people that followed me around, and we just do these tough engineering projects.
So it's like contracting gigs, kind of like single focused, tough problem, fast turnaround.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Oh,
kind of
cool.
my specialty for like 15 years or so. And then a few years ago, a bunch of stuff happened in the meantime. Worked at New Tech on the TriCaster and did video streaming and uh, started my YouTube channel. And eventually, Valve Software discovered me, which is a big video game company out of
Oh yeah,
Seattle.
yeah.
And they're like, we need someone that thinks outside the box to set up our hardware R&D department. So they hired me and gave me the mandate of, we want you to take the entire family, bring them together in the living room, everyone from grandma, grandpa, down to the grandkids, playing video games on our platform, which their platform is Steam. And
Right.
that's, if you play PC games, you almost inevitably have to buy them on Steam. And so we put this dream team together. It was amazing. We started researching everything from reading people's minds with cameras, looking at their pupil dilation and sensors all over their head and reading
That's
their, it is awesome. We did AR and VR, virtual reality and augmented reality experiments. We ended up making a set-top box. Anyone that's familiar with the kind of virtual reality space, they may have heard of the HTC Vive headset. That
Yep.
was our team that did that. And so out of that, I had discovered a bunch of novel optical properties that allowed me to build an AR system that was super friendly and easy to use, and like solved all of these really tough problems that the big boys are still struggling with today. And so a few years ago, they decided that they weren't going to go down the AR path. They were going to only do VR. So they cut the entire AR team, including myself. So I went back to the founder of Valve Software. I'm like, I can't believe you're letting this whole like technology like die. Like, you should just sell it to me. And he's like, okay, it's yours.
That's Gabe
And
Newell, right?
Gabe Newell, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of Gabe's stories. He's an interesting cat.
You've seen his expansive knife collection, I assume. Then
They made him take it out of the office
did
because
they really? Oh my goodness!
there are too
Wow.
many kids running around. Although he still had some knives. Okay, funny Gabe story. I'm sorry, I told
No,
this
no, no!
before.
I love it. I love it.
So Gabe, uh, I think he's doing better these days. He's had some cataract surgery or something, but he had a hard time seeing what was going on there for a while. And so the hardware team liked to play kind of subtle pranks on Gabe.
Oh,
And
no.
for whatever reason, he had collected a couple My Little Ponies on his desk, and he just had those sitting there. And so they were lined up, and we would start adding stuff to his little My Little Pony collection, and it just started growing around his desk. And then we started getting a little more brazen, and he sits on a yoga ball. And so we'd start doing stuff like yoga ball, like he had a yoga pump there one day. So we took his yoga pump and made it look like it was hooked up to a big a pack of dynamite and like a big plunger to blow it up. And he came in and like kicked the stick of dynamite thing. Then later at Valve, they had this game character called the Balloonicorn that showed up in Team Fortress, and they had these big blow up balloonicorns that they were selling in the gift store or giving away in the gift store.
Okay.
And so we kept taking those and we'd blow them up and put them on top of his monitor. And so he'd take them and he'd just like throw them across the room.
Right.
And so one day we came in and the poor balloonicorn was stuffed in the garbage can with knives, swords sticking out of it.
Okay, yeah, because he's got him on hand, at least at the time, right?
Yeah. So anyway, a silly little story of pranking Gabe and his knives.
So he lets you walk out with this augmented reality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So $100 handshake and about $1 bazillion worth of lawyer fees. We got it out of Valve Software.
Like $100. Holy smokes.
Yeah, that's all we had to pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I started a company with some of the folks from Valve, and it was called Cast AR. It was super early in this whole AR VR thing. We did a Kickstarter. We did really well. We raised $1 million on the Kickstarter. We delivered like hundreds of these things, and then we were actually in Washington at the time, and then we moved to Silicon Valley to get access to all the Silicon Valley money. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to keep it short, but we got some money from Andy Rubin. There wasn't a great match there as far as like the way we wanted to grow our business and the way that they were forcing us to grow the business. They made us like blow the company up from like a little team of a dozen people to over 90 people like overnight.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up, and they brought in these professional executives from Sony and Disney, and they just burned through all of our money and then ended up bankrupting the company in like a super short amount of time. Mm-hmm. But so a core group of us were like, this technology is so good, and people that actually got their first units were super happy about it. So let's buy it again. So we...
You bought it cheap the first time. I assume the second time was more expensive.
It was more expensive the second time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, we pulled our own personal money. We bought it again, and then we're like, oh man, that was a total clusterfuck. Let's figure out how to not make those same mistakes. So we spent the last couple years like rethinking how we were going to approach this and how we could do a very like pragmatic launch of the product. And so, part of the problem we had before is like Andy Rubin was like, you got to go big. You got to be all googly. You got to like have $30 million marketing campaigns.
Right.
And so this time around, we're like, no, like this is emerging technology like home computers were back in the homebrew computer club days. Mm-hmm. So let's do it more grassroots this time and narrow our focus instead of trying to like change the entire world and boil the ocean in one shot. Let's be super duper narrow on what we're going after so we can market directly to the people that will be interested in it, like the homebrew computer club people.
Yep.
Because we believe AR is the next huge transition in computing, but it's going to be very much like home computers. It's going to take a decade or two before everything's mature enough that, it's with us 24 hours a day.
Right. It took so long to get a computer in your pocket, right? Like we have cell phones today, right? So same kind of deal. You're going to have something to bridge the gap, right?
Yeah, we're in this interesting situation right now where, computers, thanks to Moore's law, they got, smaller and faster every single year. Now we're looking at optics. Now we have to have like the equivalent of a Moore's law for optics. And unfortunately, physics is not very forgiving. And so you have to start coming up with clever ways to solve all these optical problems, which that was our invention that we originally came up with, was this system to do tabletop AR with really low cost, high efficiency optics. So there it is. That's how we got to this point.
Yes.
So how does it apply to ham radio?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know that, maybe hold it up for everybody. I don't know that everybody's seen it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know what it is, and, I've been following you for a while, like I said. So you, and for those, I think, I'm assuming most people know what augmented reality is, right? But you've got a surface, right, that you're wearing this device, and it allows you to manipulate it graphically and in what you're seeing. And it tracks with you looking around. You can manipulate the environment technically if you've built that software that way, right? What else, what else am I missing?
Yeah, let me back up just a tiny bit and explain AR for those that maybe aren't completely familiar with AR. So the ultimate dream of augmented reality is glasses that you wear and you're walking around the world and the glasses know everything about your world and it can augment things. So you see your friend and it can be like, hey, it's your friend's birthday because it recognizes your friend. Or instead of maps on your phone, it's like a heads up display and there's like overlays that show you on the road where to go. Or if you're playing video games, the video games just spring up out of the table and you see all the little video game characters running around. You can reach in and touch them, or you can put a physical object like a miniature plastic dragon for your D&D game, and it can actually be shooting virtual fire at that village when that moment happens.
Right.
So that's the dream, right? And it's going to come. That's the thing. It's going to take a couple decades to get to like where it's that seamless. And so what we did is we took a step back of like, what can we do that is practical for a home user and can get a lot of traction? Like, how do we make the equivalent of the first home computer for AR? Because you look at some of these walk around systems, like Microsoft has one, there's a company called Magic Leap, and there's a few others. They're like these giant spaceman helmets that you have to wear that no one would wear in public. And so immediately there's like almost no market for it because you just wouldn't walk down the street with this thing. So we're like, okay, people will look a little, or more receptive to looking a little dorky when they're sitting around the table with their friends. So let's put all of our effort into tabletop entertainment for our first market. Although our system can work for medical visualization, it can work for air traffic control, data visualization, it can be, architects can use it. There's a lot of things you can use it for, but we chose that one segment that we could go after and we could put our limited marketing dollars and be able to target those people directly. And it's been working really well this time around. So we did another Kickstarter recently. We raised pretty much double what we raised before.
Oh, great. Okay.
We sold more units than Oculus did. We sold more units than Magic Leap did. And so we're super proud of like what we were able to do with our Kickstarter as far as having this super focus on how to market it.
That's fantastic. Since we're right here, people are asking, what operating system does this run on? Can you run it off your phone? We'll ask those really quick before we get back to the ham radio thing. But since you're right here, this seems perfect to answer these.
So we made it so it runs off of PCs. It can run off Linux. It can run off of Android phones currently.
Cool. Oh, okay. So straight up, you can run it off an Android phone. That's awesome.
Yeah. And
that's super cool.
Yeah. And eventually, as we start working more with Apple, it'll be compatible with Apple devices. They're just a different beast to work with as far as approvals.
I know this is going to be a big tangent, but I found it fascinating, the lenses
Oh
for this
yeah.
system. The engineering kind of feat you had to do with that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so I'm actually proud of this. I actually did a lot of the, or came up with the initial concept of the optics on this. So let me first start with what everyone else is doing. So the other folks are trying to put the light directly into your eyes.
Right.
And so there's some severe limitations to that. And some of the limitations are like if you try to put light into a slab of glass and have an output coupler that brings it to your eye, it limits the field of view. So you have these really tiny images floating out in front of you. It's not very good for tabletop entertainment because your image is, it's like a postage stamp and you
Right.
can't, there's no like situational awareness. Another problem is the optics is fixed focus. So this is, by the way, this is our wand. This
Yep.
is how you can interact, and it's like a magic wand. You can poke things with it. So, say we have this physical thing like the end of the wand, and you want to have a virtual object on the end of it. These fixed focus optical systems, you can't focus on the wand and the virtual object at the same time because the virtual object is focused at a super narrow focal depth, like 3-4 meters away from you. And so it gives you headaches and it's hard to look at things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tons of other problems. And so what we did is we turned the optics inside out. So instead of trying to put the light directly into your eyes, we have this flip out game board that has a special optical property called retroreflection.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means simply is light that hits it returns directly back to where it came from.
Okay. That was the trick. That was what I didn't understand. I'm like, how are we doing this exactly? Because you're not shooting it at the eye, you're shooting the light out.
Yeah, so there's two small HD projectors up in the brow piece here
Okay.
that come down and strike these lenses, then go out to the retroreflector, and then it does a 180-degree turn and comes only back to you. So what's kind of fun is when people slip on the glasses and they're looking at the table and they're acting kind of doing stuff with their wand, they kind of look like a mad person because everyone else is standing around and they're just looking at this kind of dark gray game board and they don't see anything
Mm-hmm.
until they slip a pair of glasses on and then they can see what's happening. And as far as the optics in here, I'm just going to brag a little bit about it. It's like if you just used a mirror, like a 50% reflective mirror, you only get 25% of the light, best case, back to your eye because there's so many losses. Like 50% of the light goes through and is wasted, and it goes out to the game board, comes back. 50% of the light goes back into the projector, and then only 25% gets to your eyes. And so one day I was just thinking about like, there's this new type of polarization specific reflector. Like, wouldn't it be great if I could do something that utilized that because the efficiency is super high. It's like 95% of the light that strikes it in one polarization
Right.
reflects. And if the polarization is rotated the opposite direction, it's almost 100% transmissive. And
So you get
so,
very little losses on the return
yeah.
path.
And so we laminate a bunch of different materials together, these wave plates that rotate the polarization every time it strikes these lenses. So first it strikes the lens perfectly aligned to the embedded polarization specific reflector, and you get
Mm-hmm.
almost all the light out, and it gets rotated a little bit on the way out. It hits the game board, comes, it gets rotated again. Now it's in a line to go perfectly through the lens. And so we're 80 to 85% efficient on our light. So that means our projectors can be extremely small and lightweight. So these glasses are only like 85 grams
Yeah,
because
I
we're
mean, they
able,
look light just sitting.
yeah, super duper light.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and it was allowed us to shrink everything down in the headset and make it super low cost because if you put your hand in front of these when they're projecting light, you can't even see the light because there's so little light, but if it scatters off your hand. And so that solves other problems too. All these other AR systems either have to have like some super robust understanding of all the objects in your scene, including your hands or the wand or your playing card that you put on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has to like digitally try to remove the light. You end up with all these graphics overlaid on top of things and it
Right.
breaks the illusion. Ours, the light just goes right between your fingers and then hits the game board and comes back. And so there's none of this like graphics being overlaid onto the real world object.
Okay. Okay.
And then
Very cool.
by And probably the biggest thing that makes this something that you'd want to wear for like a couple hours playing games is we fixed the focus problem. And so by turning the optics inside out, we've changed the aperture of the entire system to almost a pinpoint, like a pinpoint camera or a pinhole camera.
Right.
So we actually, the light comes out of the projectors out of a little tiny aperture, really tiny, and it goes out to the game board and back again. So our aperture is extremely small. So everything is in focus. So you don't have this large aperture like a VR system.
Right.
Has a free aperture of like 3 inches, which means its focal depth is like almost infinitesimally small somewhere out in the distance.
Right.
This is in focus, so it's super comfortable. Like the objects really look like they're where they're placed in the virtual space.
And so you always want, I guess, not a lens, but your projector to have that aperture, right? A real infinite type of focus.
I mean, ideally, like the ultimate goal for AR is like you have a full light field where everything is correctly focused from the position that it's at, and we're somewhere in between. So the thing that's a little different with ours, but it doesn't give you headaches or anything, is like if you have a virtual object here and you're accommodating this, the light is actually in focus beyond that too.
Okay.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Don't want things out of focus when you're trying to look at two.
Because that could get you sick, I guess, right? If things are like out, the depth of field is all wrong for the thing that you're trying to artificially place in the environment.
But the end goal, like in the future, like when we have infinite compute and some magical optical thing that can somehow like focus every single pixel out in the world correctly, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
But it doesn't exist. There's just no way to do it.
So I'm guessing you have a capability to develop things for this system. And so really you could kind of go anywhere with ham radio. Initially when I saw it and the video I saw for it, multiple videos, I was like, oh man, you could use this when you're away from home to remote control your rig and literally be like interfacing it, seeing an overlay of propagation, like the PSK reporter that shows you where all your, where you're being picked up, stuff like that. You could visualize all of that. I'm assuming you've had those thoughts and more, right?
Yeah. I've actually, just as like a very, very side project, I've been working on some of this stuff. So yeah, you could imagine like your spotting networks and, beacon networks out there. You could be, feeding all that information into like a visualization of your shack. And you could actually see your antenna sitting out by a little virtual representation of your house. And you could see, oh, hey, this signal is actually coming off the backside of my antenna. I need to rotate because, propagation is that way.
Right.
Or, yeah.
Plus, where the signal. So if your logger knows the call sign of the person you're talking to, geographically, where they would be coming in from at too.
Yeah, you could have all kinds of cool particle effects, like, oh, this radio wave is coming in from this direction, and you could visualize that. Or imagine you're building your own antenna. So you could take NEC, put it into this, which, by the way, I've been looking at that too. Like, holy cow, that is antiquated, the code in that. But you could
the antenna modeling software?
Yeah. It's in Fortran. Oh, my God.
Oh, my goodness, really?
I don't even... Yeah. I think it's Fortran. It's crazy.
Holy smokes. What's the one that everybody's using now? The MAMM, MAMMN for something? Have you used that?
I haven't.
MMANA, that's it. MMANA.
Hopefully it's done in at least C. So it's
not Fortran, I'll tell you that much.
Okay,
but yeah, you could visualize everything, including the vertical and the cross section of how the antenna, what the shape of the propagation is.
So imagine taking your wand and you could carve the terrain, or you could take a Google Maps terrain map of your ham shack location. You could actually like lift the antenna to the height you want. You could click on elements and you could drag them around. It's like, well, what if my directors are a little bit further down the boom? So you could be moving them in real time. You'd actually see right there in a very easy way to grok The yeah.
You're the I think you're like the third person who's used the term grok on the show, and I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but I love that. I love when people mention that word. So thank you.
Maybe it's a nerd thing.
Yeah, I hope hopefully everybody's read Stranger in a Strange Land, but yes, continue please. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, Dude, it can happen in real time. I mean, that's the beauty of volumetric displays. That's basically what this kind of AR thing is. Like, we work and we live in a 3D world. Like, we know how to pick up a cup of coffee because like 99% of what we do is 3D. We're
Mm-hmm.
stuck on 2D screens and 2D interfaces just because of, legacy. But once you bring in, volumetric 3D, like, well, I want to look at that antenna propagation a little closer. So I'm just going to lean in and look closer at it. And like, oh, I see that the metal gutters that I've modeled on my ham shack are actually acting as a director because I can just model it all and I can easily place it. Anyone
Yeah.
that's used those antenna modeling tools, like, it's a nightmare. You're like numerically entering things
Yep.
and it's almost impossible to model a realistic shack.
And there's also limitations based off of just, I mean, of course all this stuff is on paper, right? So once you put it in the real world, you're going to get totally different effects. Like you just said, your gutters are going to have some kind of parasitic effect on your antenna, right?
So
So
yeah, imagine taking your drone and putting a small transmitter on
yes.
it and using AR to plot the course around the antenna. You just like map out where you want it to go and then just
Uh-huh.
send it out to transmit to your antenna. And you can
Yep.
just look at the backside versus you could map it and you just have a true representation because you're actually transmitting to your antenna.
If you think I'm a social pariah now with a massive hex beam on my roof, can you imagine what I'll look like if I have 10,000 ping pong balls covering all the edges of my home to fly my drone around to get a real time accurate model?
Yeah, yeah.
That would be awesome. So yeah, because you could drag it all in live, and then you could see, and you could even go down to the composites and the material you're using, and if you have a
Yeah.
real physical, yeah, no, I didn't even think about that, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I saw someone talk about you know 3D printers.
Right.
So for the amateur that wants to build things in 3D, you're stuck on a 2D screen. It's a very clunky way to look at 3D objects, but in an AR system, you can do one to one. So like if I want to take my vacuum cap here and make some
Yeah.
holder for it, I could actually put the vacuum cap on the table and just start extruding virtual plastic around it. And it's one to one.
Mm-hmm.
And then because like our system has cameras in it, you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine using those cameras to actually digitize, like say this vacuum cap. And so the computer knows the exact dimensions. So it's automatically carving out the correct cavity to hold the part.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be so much more efficient
Yeah.
at doing these types of tasks.
I didn't even think about that, but then for 3D printers, you could just model it all right there in front of you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I'm how do you handle the accuracy, the dimensional accuracies? Is that all just done with the cameras, and then where its placement is on your mat?
Yeah, our cameras are sub-millimeter accurate for as far as like hand position or tracking objects like the wand or
And that's more than enough for 3D
to
prints.
get you close at least. And it's only going to get better over time too. And you can augment these systems with other things. So you could add like real 3D scanners or prime sense depth sensors and different stuff to just keep increasing the fidelity of these your workstation basically.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a project I'm working on, which is an enclosure for something that has a bit kind of weird dimensions. So yeah, you're saying literally put it into the space, and you
Mm-hmm.
can draw your walls around it and do the whole thing. That is fantastic. I didn't even.
Yeah, and it's like I can't tell you that being an engineer most of my life, I can't tell you the number of times that I've designed a circuit board or an enclosure or something, and I send it out to be milled or fabricated, and it comes back, and it's like, if I could have only seen it in front of me, I would have known that that switch was going to collide with something else in my system, or I underestimated the size of the HF connector or something.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, look how spoiled we are. We literally have like 3D printers that can turn that prototyping over really quickly. But yeah, even then, oh, it's like, how many times do I have to print this thing before I get it right? That kind of, that's really cool.
And then there's so many utilities for uh, that you could imagine with AR to operate your shack, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things that I've been working on is I want to be able to scrub through spectrum. So I want to have laid out in front of me the spectrum cascading away from me in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So amplitude, vertical, and cascading away. And then I can just look at it all happening simultaneously. I want to be able to reach in with my hands and grab the spectrum and pull it backwards. I want to
Mm-hmm.
have like 30 seconds worth of history there. Like, so what was that call sign? And pull it back, listen again, tap on the column of frequency that I want to listen to and do fine
Right.
tuning, and just scrub back and forth, and then just do a flick of my hands and like go back to current and then complete that call. Right. There's like our interfaces to
Yeah.
radios are so clunky right now. I'm just super frustrated all the time. Like I see a signal and I really wish I could just go, what was that?
Right.
Like, like there's a strong signal over there. Why don't we just have the ability to just reach over there and grab it and pull it back and listen to it?
Some of the software-defined radio stuff has that, right? But that's still on the relatively more expensive end of things.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Flex back here. I have a
Sure.
7610, and it's just because the interface is so hard. I can't just, you just can't move around the spectrum, fast enough.
Um, those SDR plays, right? Those boxes, you can just be like, have a local heap of data that just first in, first outs the band space, right? And just be cycling through it, right? And then you can kind of have that backup, if you will, and then you could pull that out. But it's not like obviously what you're saying. That would be way, way better because you see where that history was, and you're like, oh no, right there, I'm gonna go and grab that and pull that forward, right? That was about the time I heard the call. No, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, yeah, and then add another layer to it. So you put your Foursquare up, and you have a phasing antenna. So you do phased arrays. So
Right.
record all that information, keep all that history. You see like your Foursquare antenna right in the
Right.
middle of your table, and you see, and you just process every single phase simultaneously. And so you actually see cascading in towards your antenna or away from your antenna,
Uh-huh.
the signal strength, spectrum in one axis, and then in 360 degrees, you'd be seeing like the directionality of the signal. Because, right now, most of like when we do like phased arrays, we're only just setting like one phasing. We're
Right.
not decoding all the rest of them. You should be decoding like every single possible combination in 360 degrees, be able to visualize it in real time, and then if you can scrub back and forth through time, it's like, well, on the back side of my, on the north side of my Foursquare, there was a signal coming in strong, but my earbuds were set to be phased on the opposite side. So I scrub back and I'm going to phase in on the back side and re-listen to that. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
I may not be explaining that very well, but
No. You're basically saying like replay time almost.
replay time, but then also be able to, if you have the ability to do what you would normally be doing as, say, rotating your antennas or in time as well.
Like sampling over and over, changing the phase array, the phase angle.
Well, let me take another approach to this. So, say a Foursquare, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can change the phasing between the different antennas, and
Right.
you can have, it's like, if you change the phasing, it's like turning your Yagi antenna
Right.
pointing one way or
You're aiming
another.
the gain. You're changing the phase array to get the gain where you
Right.
want it.
So, unfortunately, a lot of times our antennas are pointing the wrong way, or our Foursquares are phased the wrong way when the signal came through. We might have barely heard it, but if you can visualize this and you can replay time and be like, oh, it actually came in on the west side and I had it phased to the north, so I'm going to switch to the west side and re-listen to it again.
That would be some kind of signal processing on the back end, right? To do that.
Yeah.
Unless they're still transmitting at the same time. Or I mean, you could even build in the intelligence to just auto switch, right, to wherever the highest.
I mean, all the data is there. So if you just record everything for a minute, and you
Mm-hmm.
just keep it stored locally. You can just reprocess it with any phasing you want. You have an
Ah,
SDR at every one of your antennas.
gotcha. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. That's very smart.
So what I'm super excited about this
Yeah.
space and ham radio in particular, because rewinding all the way back to the ham radio operators that worked with me when I was a kid, right? These I lived in this little town of like 3 or 4 thousand people. Almost no one had computers. Guess who had computers? The ham radio operators. And these
Right.
were back then I was looking at these old farts thinking like, man, this 80-year-old dude has like a Commodore 64 there decoding slow scan TV. Like, man, like this is some really cool cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
And so like ham radio operators should be the people that are on the bleeding edge of exploring this technology, because I think go back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, like the ham radio operators have always been on the edge of technology. And
Yeah. Absolutely. I wish I feel I don't know. Sometimes I feel like that group, like you just said, that group that was rocking the SSTV with their Commodore 64s. I feel like some of them are like they don't embrace the new stuff in ham radio like they do, like they
I
did.
well, I don't know. I think there was probably the same. Maybe I got really lucky. These ham radio operators were pretty progressive. I think there's like the appliance operators that are like the 80% of the people that do ham radio, but
Sure.
then ham
Sure.
radio attracts uh, people of all ages who are pretty cutting edge. And that's what excites me about ham radio is like, I don't want to go rag chew. I want to
Yeah.
I'm going to try to put a Foursquare in my backyard, even though it's too small for it, and just see what happens. And
Got it. I mean, that's what I always say is it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. You're never going to get like the best setup. I mean, most people won't. We just don't have
mhm.
the land for it. But you're going to get something, and you're going to learn something from experimenting, from actually doing. Not just talking about it, but actually doing.
I can't wait until these AR tools, like the first person develops these and then uses it during a contest and just cleans everyone's clock. And then, the old farts are going to be like, we should ban that. It's terrible. Bring back my paper logs. Like this computer's destroying ham radio, but it's really going to open it up to like
Yeah.
lots and lots of new people that are excited about it.
As somebody who streams a lot myself, and you did too, or maybe you still do. Do you still stream?
Sometimes I do more YouTube videos these days.
So let's say I had a my rig set up to run a contest and I'm doing some visualizations with something like, with the Tilt 5. And I'm wearing the glasses. Can I have the glasses or something like it on a tripod and feed that into the computer, or would I just feed what I'm seeing into the computer for people watching the stream?
On our system, we give you two options. So we can do a live stream out of the system that can be at a fixed camera position. So it's a virtual camera. So you point it, and it's completely virtual. You don't see any of the environment around you. Or you can take a webcam and you can put a webcam at a particular position, and it'll automatically do like a green screen composite over the top. And
Oh, so it doesn't have
that's
to be a special camera.
no, just a regular old webcam.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so our tracking system in the headset has a bunch of cameras that look at the scene. You can also use a webcam to figure out where the game board is, and it
Yeah.
knows like how to composite the graphics. So on the stream, you would see your hands moving around, you'd see the wand, and you would see like dragging the antenna elements around, and you could live stream it out. We felt that was
Right.
super, super important. Like, all the youngins these days
Yep. Yep.
don't play video games unless they can stream it, or they love to tune in and watch people play.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, a lot of the time, I'd say more people are watching people play games than actually
Oh,
playing
by
games
far.
anymore. It's crazy.
I got access to all the metrics at Valve. It's nuts, and it's
I
only
can only
getting more.
imagine. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
only imagine. Instead of watching television like some sitcom, people are just watching their favorite gamers and having fun with the live kind of stuff that happens.
it's
Man,
interesting human nature. It's like, and we see this in ham radio too. There's
yeah,
like this admiration of people that are really skilled at what they do, and you can live vicariously through them. Like when I go to Contest University and I hear about all these like pro contesters, and and they're telling their wild stories of going off to some exotic island to run the contest. I'm like, oh, I kind of get this an endorphin hit almost as strongly as if I'd actually done it myself.
It's that vicarious living through people doing something, right? Why is YouTube so popular? It's this
Mm-hmm.
vicarious living. Really quick question came in the chat. People are already seeming to be interested in making their own apps. I'm assuming there's an API, right? If
Yeah.
an aspiring ham radio operator watching right now wanted to make their own stuff, how difficult would it be to get into doing that?
It's actually pretty simple. On my YouTube channel, I have like the 5-minute guide to like using our SDK in the game engine called Unity.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
okay. It
kind of,
runs off Unity. Great. Okay. Wonderful.
yeah. So it's kind of unfortunate that Unity calls himself a game engine. It's actually can be used for more than games. People are making lots of applications in Unity. So we support Unity and Unreal and native support. So Unity and Unreal are really simple. It's a drag and drop process. You import the plugin. The biggest thing you have to do is you create your 3D scene,
Mm-hmm.
drag in the plugin, and then you attach it to the built-in camera, the virtual camera that's in the game, and then our headset just takes over that camera and moves it to where your head position is. So, and Unity runs in metric; it's just
Mm-hmm.
meters. So, if I want something that's 1 millimeter tall in the game or on the table, I just make a game element that's 1 meter tall, a game object, and
Yeah.
it's 1 millimeter. And since our systems calibrate, we calibrate all the systems so that they're sub-millimeter accurate. So when you set that to 10 millimeters, it's 10 millimeters for real in the real world.
That is fantastic. Well,
And
that
it,
answers that question, and that makes me feel like I could actually make something on this. So that's very exciting for me.
Unity is so easy. Like, if anyone goes back and looks at our old Kickstarter videos, like all of the video that's in there. We did some compositing for the main video, but that was all me. I made all of that, and I'm not a game programmer. So,
Mm-hmm.
like the chess scene and the race game and the Dungeons and Dragons, that was just me, like in a few weeks putting that together for promotional purposes.
Oh, that's awesome. I was well, not so much anymore, but I did embedded C++ and mainly Java. So I also didn't do anything graphically. So this is I could do this. I'm excited now. You've got me very excited for this. So excellent. Um,
Awesome.
I do you how soon do you have to go? Because we've got a ton of questions, and I know we wanted to talk about
I could do
electronics,
like
but
15 minutes or so. I'm
okay.
sorry, like
No, no,
I've
no.
been
And in
rambling
fact,
too much.
I just want to have you come back on, and we'll do another part to this. We'll cover the electronics another time because I know you could probably talk about that for multiple hours. So
Yeah.
I'm not even worried. But let's hit some of the questions because people had some good questions, and I want to do that. Ben Stanley asks. With manufacturing in China impacted by the coronavirus, how will this affect Tilt 5?
Oh, it definitely affects us.
It affects everybody, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you bring that up because that's the forefront of our minds right now. So, um, backstory on the coronavirus. So in December we did a trial run of parts. Thank goodness we did a trial run of parts. These parts came to our office and we're like, oh, there's some mechanical flaws in them, and we started the process of fixing these mechanical flaws. And our build was going to be the day after the Chinese New Year. We were going to start a 3,000 unit build.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, several weeks prior to that, we're like, hey, there's this virus thing going on. And we're actually having the final units assembled in Japan. And so, our Japanese partners were like, yeah, there's this virus thing going on. It doesn't look too bad yet. And then a couple weeks go on, and Chinese New Year happens. And it's like, this is looking really bad. I'm like, oh, man. And then the by the time we got to the point where we were supposed to build our first 3,000, uh, they wrote back to us and they're like, uh, our Japanese partners were going to go to China and assist us on the build. Like, we're not traveling there. And then all the travel bans started happening. It's like, thank goodness we had like kind of dodged all of that. And
Yeah, because you
so
could have been locked up somewhere in a quarantine, right? Or someone could have.
yeah, I mean, we were going to jump on planes and go over there and assist the build. So some of my personnel was going to be over there. So
Wow.
we're very thankful that none of our partners or our personnel are in danger. So now we're looking at like, okay, well, we have these parts that have some mechanical flaws in them, and so now we're rigging up fixtures so that we can put them in CNC machines to like mill out like these areas where there were some flaws, so we can keep building units off of those parts. So we'll be able to continue building. As far as like how it's going to impact us, we have no clue. Like we sold, I think the total tally is over 7,000 units, and so until things clear up a little bit, we're not going to be able to start chipping away at those. Fortunately, we weren't planning on like doing the delivery until the summertime, so we're just hoping that things blow over quick.
Right.
We're also looking at like, well, if there's still travel bans, but the factory, we got word that the factory is opening back up next week. Can we trust them to build some of the parts without messing them up? Which is always a challenge. Like if you're not there, you know, they don't quite understand your design, and
right. You're going to get some first time run loss type of things too, right?
Right. And so we're trying to figure that out. We're a little nervous about it. And we've been communicating with our backers saying like, hey, this is a thing.
Yeah.
But as a small startup, I mean, we're partially venture backed and Kickstarter backed. We have to be like super, super duper careful with the money. Like if we were to commit to like build 3,000 of these things and they were all like defective in some bad way, like, and we had to throw them away, it could be a fatal blow to the company. So
right.
we're just kind of pausing, and we're working with the parts we have until we have more information.
It's almost better to be a little late, but get the product correct, right? Than
yeah. And this is
rush it.
affecting like my colleagues at big companies and small companies. It's like it's going to have some long-lasting impact.
Oh, it already has. It's made my Wish orders go twice as long as normal. Where will I get my weird Wish.com orders from? Another question. So can you use? So this question is, I'm kind of reading into it, but someone said FT8 waterfall on the table and PSK reporter map in the air. Could you do two mats?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can have multiple mats.
So just make your whole room almost.
And it's volumetric too. So when you're sitting at the mat, you get like this big work volume. So you could have, it could be layers. There could be transparency between these different layers. So you could have, PSK reporter spots and a 3D globe kind of like at kind of the base level or descending into the table. You have like unlimited volume. It looks like a big hole opens up in your table going down into the table. And you could have your waterfall like skimming across the top. A lot of stuff you can do. You get multiple people interacting on the same data, so you could like a multi-op situation. You could have multiple people in there like helping you tune while you're like doing some other operation off to the side.
Yeah, this is very cool.
It's a giant. It's a really big workspace. So it's like just a giant monitor that you can reach in and touch things, and things pop out of it, and things descend into it. So just your mind can go wild of like how you can start utilizing that space. So you can have two.
My gears are turning right now.
Yeah, a lot of people, it's funny when people start working with our system, they're like, oh, I'm going to have to make UI systems that are 3D. I'm like, no, just make your UI 2D. It actually is a better, make your menus something that you are familiar with. But then when you get to like the meat of what you want in 3D, make it pop, just boink, pop up out of the table.
Yeah, okay. Somebody asked about, so they wanted to know about the Left 4 Dead AR game that Valve was working on. I think that might have been somebody from Twitter that was following you.
Sounds
here.
like I know nothing about.
Okay, all right, okay, good.
It was fun having all their franchises when I worked at Valve, though. So there was a lot of experimentation. I think I could talk about this. I mean, there was a really cool demo that we did. Let's just say that it was a game like Left 4 Dead. So
okay.
Took the Left 4 Dead map, mapped it on the table. You sit next to your friend who's actually playing on the television, and then you have the wand, and you can do two things. The person wearing the AR glasses could do two things. They could use the wand to drop health packs in, or they could drop in zombies. And it was insanely fun. So you see your buddy running around in 3D on the table, and he's coming around a corner, and you like drop 1,000 zombies around the edge of the building, and he's like, wow, he gets killed. And of course, your buddy reaches over and punches you in the arm, like, hey, stop that. So the next time he's running through, you put a bunch of zombies and you put a bunch of health packs. And it really added a really fun element to the game.
Did you ever play the game Natural Selection?
I haven't.
It's aliens versus humans, first person shooter, but the commander of the humans gets into a command chair, and it becomes a top down real time strategy game.
Oh,
So
yeah.
literally, you could use that if you were playing the command role. Wow, that's really okay. That was one
There's
of
a
my
lot
favorite
of cool
games.
things you can do with
Yeah,
video
yeah, yeah.
games with our system.
Sure.
It's like, you know, 4K televisions are great for doing first person shooters. Like, why map it to, something else when you have that beautiful display? But asymmetrical play, where you have your beautiful 4K TV sitting there and you play it in a familiar way, but you can have all of your stats out on the table, or you can have your mini map sitting there in 3D on the table in front of you. Or you could have your friends participating, like I said, like in this kind of Left 4 Dead scenario where they're dropping in or they're assisting you, moving things out of the way as you're running through in first person.
Right. Oh man, that's super cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a little. You're like a hamster in a maze, right? And you got the person playing God messing with you while you're going through it. That's very cool.
Yeah, our system works really well. There's like a whole like class of games which is all like isometric or 2/3 view, top down kind of games, and those just map over beautiful. And it's just like the porting process when developers bring those over, it's like a few days of work, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this like you know populist type game is now like living for real on the table.
Yeah. Uh, Vanessa Privet asks, "How easy is it to program for multiple people viewing at the same time?"
It's pretty easy. So depending on what you want to do, you can have a shared view where everyone sees the same information, or you can have things like fog of war, and gets pretty interesting. So imagine a D&D scenario or a
Yeah.
war strategy. So I often talk about the D&D one. So it's like, so your dungeon master or your GM comes in, prepares the whole map. All the monsters are already pre-laid out. He or she may have worked on that for weeks and they'd use the wand to set everything up. But then when you start playing the game, the fog of war for everyone else around the table, you only see the room that you're in at that point. They can't see the upcoming monsters, but the dungeon master gets to see, like, right behind that wooden door,
Mm-hmm.
the monster sitting there. And so that opens up a lot of like unique and new theatrics that you can do in this type of gameplay. So imagine the dungeon master, can set up this elaborate world, and now can do the theatrics of like an eerie mist settles below the crack of the door, and the dungeon master can wave their hand like over the door, and an eerie mist starts to drop out of their hand and kind of like flow out from underneath the door. The villagers told you not to enter, but you do anyway, and then there's the monster and the jump scare happens.
Uh
And
huh.
but
That's
then like
awesome.
for war simulations, like these RTSs, so I can be setting all my troops up and all my defenses, and my friends can't see that. They just
Mm-hmm.
see me just kind of wiggling my hands around. Then you start the campaign, and then the action starts to happen, and then the fog of war lifts, and then you get to see some of their stuff, and you get to see some of your other friends' stuff. Another part of our system that's really unique is we've made it very easy with network play so that you can link game boards together. So
Oh,
more people would,
remotely,
yeah,
like over the
more,
internet.
yeah. So it uses standard networking protocols like Croquet or Photon or any of these things that you use on Unity already. And you, one of the biggest friction points for people coming together and playing, if they're video game players, like it's hard to play a video game on one television screen. You have to have multiple screens, and you can't have private information. Our system solves that.
Yep.
Um, so it makes it really fun if you're together. But if you can't be together, you just link your game board together. And now you can be talking through the speaker and microphone that's built into it with each other. As I move my hands through the scene, you can see my hands kind of moving through the scene. And what we've been able to achieve is it feels very connected, like you're in the same room, even though you're apart. So you can have any number of people in the same room and any number of people um, remote, all log in together. And
Yeah.
then there's other things that you can do. So there's completely asymmetrical views into this virtual world that you can do. So um, in contrast to like static, like a static view where like I put a virtual object, everyone sees it in that same space. Now you can have bigger maps, and you can have people can be scrolled all over the map in different places, and you have no direct correlation between the that virtual object. My virtual object may be on the mat. That virtual object for someone else, because they've like traveled somewhere else in the map, maybe completely off the display.
So they share
They,
the same world, but not necessarily have to be in the same
yeah,
surface.
yeah, and you have that connectedness, and that's important. And there's actually part of the reason we're really doubling down on this like tabletop entertainment aspect, because you could do a lot of other things. You could hang this board on the wall and do experiences off the wall, but there's this huge trend happening right now, people wanting to come together and be connected, um, kind of in the round. That's why
Mm-hmm.
board games are exploding right now.
Yeah.
Why um, you know, people are starting to like do network gaming again. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's been really on the uprise right now. And then the stats are like people that play games, video games, it's almost up to 70% of people that play games to be connected with their friends. So using voice chat and just being together online
Mm-hmm.
is dominating these days.
Yeah. There's so many applications for that. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is the one that just jumps out immediately. But yeah, all kinds of stuff. That's fantastic. I've got one more question. Brian Rose asks, "Did Joe Walsh create a song for her pinball machine?"
Oh, you should.
I don't know if they're asking if he did for you in the past, or I don't know. I thought maybe that would you might know more about that than I did, but I don't know.
All I know is I had a crazy interview on Ham Nation with Joe Walsh, part of it, and he's a trip.
Hmm.
So yay
Uh,
for Joe Walsh.
so what does Tilt 5 stand for? Somebody just asked.
I can't tell you. It's a inside secret.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. It's
Oh,
kind of
cool.
it's a joke that makes us laugh. So when we had the first company called Cast AR, we thought it was a little bit too on the nose, and we no one really liked the name, and so naming things is really hard. And when we started the new company, we're like, let's find something generic that makes us laugh,
Hmm.
and it's going to be dumb anyway. So you know, that's what we did, because I got some advice from some marketing colleagues. They're like, there's no perfect name. There's a lot of silly names out there, and if it deeply means something to you, you can own it and you can make it your brand. And so we decided Tilt 5 was it, and
Sure.
we're gonna make it ours. It's gonna be like Google is weird. Snapchat is weird, right?
Right, right. It's something odd, but you can market it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, we definitely ran out of time faster than I thought. We did not hit all the things that I want to talk about. So I want to
Sorry, I'm
bring.
so
No, no,
long-winded.
no, no. It's not long. No, not at all. Everything was fascinating. I'm very excited to be able to get my hands on one and
Yeah.
try to see how we can play radio with it. Oh yeah, just coming to mind.
You're
You
local,
could.
so come by sometime.
Oh, where are you located?
Silicon Valley. I thought you were here in
Oh,
California, close.
I'm SoCal, Los Angeles area. But
Oh,
that's
close enough.
yeah. I was just out of the top of my head. Kit building. You could put the instructions right next to you,
Yeah, I mean,
or
for
whatever.
education. So you want to get into electronics, so you're building a circuit board, you could have a virtual representation of the
Of the
circuit board right
paths.
there. And you could have like great visuals of like where are the electrons going in the capacitor, and you could just kind of zoom in on the virtual representation of the capacitor as it's oscillating. You see the electrons getting trapped on one of the plates,
Mm-hmm.
um, or having the ability, like if you're building like a kit where you're soldering it together, where you actually show like the person that makes the kit digitizes every single part as it's being inserted into the board, and you can see the correct rotation of the chip and the correct
Yeah.
direction in a more intuitive way, instead of trying to look at flat pictures and like what's my orientation. It's like, no, it's really just like a virtual representation of the board sitting right there on the table.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, this is going to be great. Okay.
It's going to be great.
It is great, right? It already is great. Everybody's already yelling in the chat to have you back, so we're definitely going to have you back
Yay!
to talk about electronics. Thank you so much for heading or staying on. Jeri's got to go to an event that she has that
Analog
she's.
aficionados
Oh,
tonight.
there you
It's
go.
it's a once a year event put on by the big analog guys, analog chip guys in town. So I have to go make an appearance. So I'm gonna leave.
Okay, I'll wrap things up here. You head out. Thank you so
All right,
much, Jeri, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
super fun.
And we'll talk later. See ya. Oh, that was fantastic. Well, I'm very excited now. This is going to be very cool. I already, I guess I don't know what it is about emergent technologies that you either have to see it or you kind of have to have it explained in a way that you can go like start making those mental connections on how you can use it. And just hearing Jeri talk, I'm already thinking like, oh, we could use this. Oh, we could do this. Like all these things like for those of you that are into FT8, you may be using JT Alert. There's a program called Grid Tracker, right? Grid Tracker prints out where you're hitting as these cool little arcs on a map, kind of like PSK Reporter does, but it's a little bit more interactive. You could just do that on your table, like that's awesome. So I'm super into that. We will have Jeri back for sure to talk about some other fun things and just walk through some of her electronic stuff. By the way, Jeri is on YouTube. Check her out, Jeri Ellsworth. The link is in the description for Jeri's Twitter, so make sure you go follow her there so you can stay up to date on what's going on with her and Tilt 5. I think we're gonna call it because we're actually run a little bit long. I wanted to do call-ins, but that's okay. We'll worry about that another time. That was just so fast and furious. That was great. So I'm gonna switch right over here and give a big thank you to the patrons, guys. Remember, we are gonna wrap this up and then we're gonna head over to the Discord for live after chat. If you want to follow me along over there, we can talk some more. They'll be posting the link in the comments and the links in the description to join us over on Discord. And I will also be streaming on Twitch, the after chat. So if you're interested in that, follow me on Twitch as well, which I am the Angry Shoverbot on Twitch. And the best way to get the link for that is also on Discord. I usually post it there. But anyway, big thank you to the patrons. Thank you so much for the support you give. I've got the newsletter coming out, and I've got a contest coming up that's going to be patron only that I'm putting out. So that should be a lot of fun. It does require a little bit of work, but I'm going to ask the patrons for a little bit help in making something, so that should be a lot of fun. So anyway, big thank you to Jason Brown, Jason Siebert, David Dancero, Danny Miller, Wesley Magyar, Barbara Schrock, Evan Hartman, Mark Fields, Brad Snyder, Dennis Dunderdale, Garrett Larson, 86DM Dennis, The Wyoming Ham, who I saw, he is right there. Sure wishes Carol would post a Discord link. All right, Carol, get on it. The Wyoming Ham is requested. Randall Hensley, Dennis Mickelson, Michael Hunt, George Gaini, Andy, Kenny Miyamoto, Ron Thorson, Ken Hall, Sean Bales, KG7ITX, Dragetchevich, Rob Zarge, Devin B. Hedge, Mark Chase, Raymond Cracker, Geraldo Kelso, Rob K8BCR, Lee Harrell, let's see, where was it? Michael Kearney, Steve Barker, Corey Sheldon, Brad Nadow, Stephen Hunt, Conrad Carroll, Michael Marusin, Mike Heerly, Gerald Carpenter, The Brew Crew. I did get through my beer. I'll pull another one here for the after chat. Stephen Hunter, Justin Rao, Stephen Carduz, Richard Smith, Hercules, KC1LZR, John Flowers, Steve Blandford, Tom Wright, Bill McCarty, Good Game Ham Radio, who I also saw in the chat, David Gerald, Simon Deards, Nicholas Dubé, Michael Iafreto, Jason Ravenfield, Masi Madi, Daniel Sullivan, Michael Hunt, Jason Legg, and Jonathan Williams. I want to give a shout out to the couple of super chats that came in. I saw them. They didn't have a question, but I do appreciate that. So thank you very much for sending in those super chats. I'm sorry I didn't want to pause Jeri mid stroll or mid stride there with her stories, and so thank you very much. I appreciate the support. I am Josh KI6NAZ. You've been watching the Ham Radio Crash Course, and I will talk to you later. See ya. Also, come over to Discord. We're going to go the